Hello, and welcome back to Color Cues, a new series from Homepage News. I'm Tom Mirabile, the president of Springboard Futures and consumer trend forecaster for the IHA. We created Color Cues to bring you actionable updates and relevant inspiration on evolving color trends in the home and housewares marketplace. And we know that the best way to do that is to speak with the world's leading color trend forecasters and influencers. So today, I am pleased to be speaking with Patti Carpenter, Global Trend Ambassador and President of Carpenter and Company. Patti, thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Obviously, the pandemic spurred some color trends forward, pulled other color trends back, all sort of in response to the needs and emotions of the consumer. Now that we've moved into sort of an inter-pandemic reality where we don't feel completely safe, but we don't feel like, completely unsafe or back out socializing, what color stories are becoming more important?
Well, that's a really great question. And I love that word interpandemic that you've coined. It really does speak to sort of where we are. It's still a lot of uncertainty. The kinds of things that we're seeing are things that are certainly for us, the range of the color greens is really important, where we see those being very grounding, very comforting. We see them with a bit more of an herbal or an acidic flair to them, sort of like new sprouts, that thing that gives us that sense of new birth, recreation. That's certainly one of the bigger things we see happening. And then there's certainly other kinds of palettes that we see coming forward as well.
So the greens are definitely getting more yellow influence, you're saying?
Absolutely. We see them getting more yellow. The other color range that I would say is the mid-range blues. We've been talking about clear sky thinking, blue sky thinking, that whole idea of that wonderful blue sky ahead, that sense of optimism again that brings to us as human beings. And so those mid-range blues, think of your well-worn jeans, those loved, that just fit your body as soon as you put them on, that sense of comfort and casualness that brings. But also we know blue is the most trustworthy color in terms of what people's perception about that is. And we need that sense again to take us forward.
Yeah, and our associations with water. And I mean, there's so many, the earthiness of that. Yes. It's very almost in our DNA to love that colors.
Exactly.
I love what you're saying about denim blues and like comfy jeans and things like that. Evocative. So you have a long history, speaking about jeans, you have a long history in fashion and textiles. And the trickle down from fashion trend to home trend, if it happened at all, really could be 5 years, it could be a year. What's the relationship with those trend evolutions now? What's the kind of time?
Well, it's really interesting because that certainly has contracted over time. When I was in fashion several years ago, it used to be maybe a 3 to 5 year lag between when we saw it come down the runway and when we saw it in the home. But with the advent of the internet, the idea that everybody can get access to the same information immediately, the fact that I can sit here in my living room and watch the fashion shows in Milan and Paris, on YouTube immediately. So we're all getting the same information at the same time. What's the difference is how we utilize it. And that's the big story. I mean, for me, even if you think about the way that I do my color boards, there's often a fashion figure on them to show that we really are in that same place, dovetailing with some of those same ideas. And it's really about how they're interpreted for space versus for fashion, so fashion for the home versus fashion for the body, if you will.
And I remember, that 3 to 5 year period. It was like heaven because you got to see you had to do it. It was because, you still had to change. Like home would change, but it wouldn't change quite as fast as fashion. Yes. And, and because of that, you really had a sense of whether something was working or not, whether it was going to stick. So, clearly pattern and color and ready to wear have an enduring influence across home categories. But how do you look at current trends and get a sense of which are going to be meaningful and in home categories and which will not? Because like I said, you don't have as much time now. You have to decide.
You do have to decide. And what's interesting is it still doesn't change. Certainly, you're not changing your home as quickly as you're going to change your clothing. However, there are certain sort of overarching things. I'll come back around for a moment to the idea of color. There's a palette that I've been watching for a while that's been what we've been calling this Midtone Palette that really got very creamy over the last few seasons. There's a sort of whiteness and lightness to these mid-range colors, and they're beautiful range because they play well with every other range. You can put them with the gray side and cool neutrals. You can put the warm side in those beige and browns and wonderful, taupes and those warm neutrals. You can play them back against darks. You can, layer them for tonality against pastels. So there's that kind of a range of color that comes through. But then take something like cottagecore, which we've been talking about for a long time in terms of just the inspiration, getting earthier, being out in the world where most of us had to get out of our homes. That was pretty much all we could do was get out into nature, and nature restored us. So you think about, walking through meadows of wildflowers and how those kinds of flowers showed up in home textiles, whether they showed up in wallpaper, whether they showed up in drapery, whether they showed up in pillows, but you saw those same kinds of floral inspirations coming through, from that same kind of mindset of what we were doing while we were at home baking, while we were gardening, while we were riding our bikes, while we were picnicking, while we were sitting outdoors to read a book and not be on a screen. So all of that kind of inspiration is around us all the time, and we're taking all of that in. And this is really sort of how it's coming out. So it's the same kind of influence, but just showing up in different ways.
Well, and you're going to share that palette with us later, and because and I appreciate that. But one of the things that I like about it is, for me, cottagecore has always been kind of these direct wildflower brights almost. It's been a bit cloying. Mm-hmm. And so what I love about it is that sort of pullback, that tinting of these colors and mineralizing a little bit has really made them so much more versatile. So I agree with you. I can't wait for you to share that with us.
And also it's that sense of nostalgia that comes from that. And see, when you think of color in a nostalgic way, it takes that color down some. It softens it. The memory sort of softens what that color is, mutes it out a bit. And that's really where I think they look best in home.
Yeah, and a lot of cottagecore and all of them. There's 50 million descriptions of that whole, urban farm and, American farmstead and all these, it's a great way to update it because they've been so heavy and white.
Yes.
This is a really nice way to sort of blend in with all that without having to completely reinvent your look.
Yeah.
So you have always been a very active, engaged supporter of equality in society and in the industry. How has that influenced the way you use color in your work?
Oh, for me, it's at the root of all I do. I am a Black woman. That's the lens that I see the world through. When I left the fashion industry after over 25 years, it was one of those things where I knew for myself that I needed to do something that felt more connected with the work that I was doing. And that took me into my artisan work, traveling around the world, working with artisans, helping them to bring what they make by hand to markets that, that were applicable and approachable for them. And just being able to have that kind of travel lens now to also process things through, to look at color in different light in different countries, to look at color the way it's used in an indigenous way, in pattern and print. All of that influences what I do. I can't sort of separate any of that. So when I'm looking at color, I'm looking at all the cultural, all the political, all the natural, all of those different, sieves, if you will, that one runs these things through, and then layering it, of course, with my expertise and my experience. But I can't separate those two things. They're all interdependent, and they definitely.
I think one of the reasons why that's so important, what you bring to the table, so to speak, is that sense of right now we can't travel. All of the places we've been, like India and China and Africa, all of these places that we've traveled to. All of a sudden, the only way we can bring them to the world oftentimes is through color and through texture and through pattern and through all of those things that, so it's that global aspect has just become a super important part of the way we communicate, in design without being able to travel. I think people are so hungry for that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we've seen the rise again, as you talk about what kinds of things have come forward, that idea for handmade, feeling like something has been touched by another human being, the appreciation of high craftsmanship, not just the DIY loving hands at home, but that sense of something that's a mastery, that these are master crafts people who understand their techniques and their skill sets and have honed them over time. And in many cases, over many generations. I decided to wear this scarf today. I did this scarf with a group of women in Vietnam, probably 6 years ago. And this palette is really still very much speaking to me. And these are all colors that are naturally dyed on silk that we went out and I watched them spin. We dyed them.
I thought you were wearing that to kiss up to Lee Eisman because you like the yellows and the grays.
No, this is just, this is the kind of weight of color. Again, there's that creaminess to it because it's silk. So it's not super bright. It's naturally dyed, which often does give you a sort of more subtle cast to the color. And these are the kinds of things that I think we're really resonating with now. They touch us. They really connect with us, in a very.
Well, I'm looking over your shoulder because I'm a nosy Parker, and you haven't invited me over yet, so I have no choice. But I'm sure that it's you purchased all of those things that you've purchased on your various travels. It's amazing how they just hang together with this like tremendous texture and neutrality. And I think that's a new sofa.
Yeah, that's my new sofa. You and I had a conversation about this. I've never had a color sofa before. I have been working in color for so long that I really always relegated myself to a neutral. So my home was very neutral with these accents, certainly of where the places I've traveled. Right. But I always had, in terms of the large pieces, my sofa, the big chairs, those were always neutral because I didn't want to. I thought I might affect how I looked at things. I fell in love with. I fell in love with this color. Yeah. And it was one of those things where we got it in the middle of the pandemic. We just sort of said, Brian laughed at me. He didn't think I was serious when I went, I think I really like this russet swatch,
Right. Well, at a point, you get to trust yourself to sort of edit out those sorts of things. So which other industries are your favorites for hunting down emerging color trends?
Oh, I love, well, you know me, you call me the culture vulture, which is so hysterical to me, but I love art. We love museums. So I'm always out. We were just upstate this weekend. We went to Olana. I don't know if you've ever gone up there, but people kept telling me to go see this house. It's an extraordinary house of Frederick Church, one of the Hudson River, painters, and the work that they did just on the outside of the house is the palette we're talking about. Basically, it's stunning, but to walk through, in the autumn and see that. So that kind of art and architecture is very inspirational. But then just last week, I went to visit a friend's gallery right here in the city on 39th Street. It's called Culture Object. And he had this incredible lighting exhibition that he was doing with artists, sort of taking whatever the materials are that they work in, and then making it a functional piece by turning it into a lighting piece, a lamp of some sort. And he had them in glass, he has them in metal, he has them in ceramic. He has one of my favorite ones is a grown. This one artist takes a recycled plastic tube and grows crystals on it. So it's really about that whole
I know this one. Yes. I know that.
Yeah, it's really about the idea of finding new ways to have our raw materials and not to rip them out of the earth, as we talk about being mindful, climate change, all of that. So all of those things are constantly influencing how I'm looking at what I'm working on, because to me, art is up at the top and it kind of moves down. Artists think these bigger, imaginative, innovative thoughts that don't have to be necessarily, in our world, it'll be practical. But then designers kind of take some of that same zeitgeist and move it down into what are those practical things that we can use, that are going to be around us in our spaces. And so I'm always looking at art. That's one of my favorites.
It's one of my favorites too. Okay, I wanted to ask you a question, sort of a fill in the blank. Right?
Okay.
So, it's some people hate this, and I would personally hate it if somebody did it to me, but it's not going to stop me.
I'm like, me.
So, in fill in the blank, in this interpandemic period, people are looking to color for a sense of.
It's a big one. Right now, I think color has a couple of functions. Comfort is a big one. I really think that we look for things around us that make us, feel good in this time of turmoil and anxiety and the unknowing, something that we love a color of, like the way I determined I love that sofa. It gives us a sense of comfort. And I also think that it brings a sense of optimism with it. There's this, color can be joyful and hopeful. And in this time that we need those kinds of foundational things that are bigger than us, that are out, that give us this idea that this too shall pass. We've moved through other things. We will move through this. So that sense of comfort and optimism, I think, go hand in hand. And I think color brings that. I absolutely believe, it really does.
Oh, I completely agree. Good answer.
Exactly.
You said that you were going to share with us. I'd asked you to share a palette that you think is going to be a viable palette with just a great mass appeal. And you had spoken about it before, this idea of creamy confections, I think you called it.
So here's the board that we've done for creamy
absolutely.
confections. And it really does speak about that range that I was talking about earlier, that mid-tone range, but that's whiter. Think of it almost like French macarons. It's this wonderful kind of whiteness underneath the color that lifts it. It's lighter, but it plays very nicely against the warm side of the neutrals or the cooler side of the neutrals. And look, the way it looks on the base of those tables with that wonderful almost cementy taupe, and how that's reflected right next to it in those beautiful bowls or in the stippled glaze on the platter at the top. And then that screen on the top right, where you see that master craftsmanship we spoke about and the caning on the bottom. And then they've just woven thread to give you that wonderful basket weave in tonality and colors.
It's great. I love the transparency built in the plate at the top, that seeing one glaze over another, the way the two glazes cross over and create that sort of almost mushroomy gray that we were talking about. I love, and the top one, that I keep saying transparency, but the translucency of the tabletops at the bottom left, really, really beautiful. It reminds me, it's a perfect palette name. It reminds me of La Durée.
Absolutely. That's why it was named Creamy Confections. And even the fact that the furniture on that middle row on the left, that they didn't go to a neutral for the metal, that they powder coated it in a beautiful creamy color. I think that's what makes it look new and fresh. So just thinking about ways to utilize these colors in just a slightly different way than normal.
Also, it just gives it more importance to take something that normally you'd say, okay, let's do that in steel or, in just chrome or whatever we're going to do, or brush. But it really does give it some impact that way. So show us the palette in chips. So
here we've picked the Pantone colors that we think really resonate that way. But again, they look so much like that confectionery kind of a color, whitened, creamier, tastier, if you will.
Now, I'm sorry, just as a correction, you're showing this as for 2023, but when does this start being viable? Because
now, we take it forward. I thought you were talking about from the point of being further out. So I took
that's fine.
2022 in 3 months.
No, it's absolutely fine. I just want to make sure that, if we go, it's going to be viable still to 2023, but we could start working with this, starting next spring, really.
Tomorrow.
Okay, I'm in for tomorrow. All right. Thank you
so much for spending some time.
Patti Carpenter. Thank you all for joining us. And please join us again for the series. Another episode is going to be up soon. And it's been great spending time with you, Patti. And thank you also from Homepage News. You can reach Homepage News at www.homepagenews.com, or you can reach me at springboardfutures.com. Thanks again. Bye, Patti.
Thank you. Bye, Tom.